All right, welcome back to the deep dive, everybody, where we dive deep and we get you smart fast. And today we're looking at something that's fascinating, but kind of gets overlooked a lot
Yeah,
in the American Revolution. We're talking the Battle of Valcour Island
that's right.
on Lake Champlain, October 1776. So what's the deal with this, right? It's on a lake. It's, not one of those big famous battles everybody's heard of, but it really matters.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a naval engagement
Yeah.
in this like really tight stretch of water
Yeah.
between the New York mainland and then Valcour Island.
Yeah.
And the question is, how does this seemingly, smaller battle
Yeah.
actually play such a huge role in the revolution?
Right, right.
So we're going to like break down, the details of the battle itself,
Yeah.
but also kind of the strategy,
The context.
the big picture, what's going on. And we've even got some amazing stories about the ships themselves.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So we're going to try and show you how Valcour Island is more than just, like a footnote.
Right. It's not just a little blip on the radar. There's a lot more to it.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of this comes down to the big personalities, right?
Oh, yeah,
Big players.
absolutely.
So for the British, we've got the Governor General, Guy Carleton.
Right.
And facing him, leading the Americans, we have Benedict Arnold. And, obviously this is early in the war. He's a hero at this point.
Yeah, yeah. At this point, he's the hero.
So, all right, we've got this battle on a lake. It seems kind of remote, but it's strategically vital. Why?
Okay, so to understand that, I think we got to step back and think about, rewind a little bit. Think about 1776.
Yeah.
In June of 1776, the Continental Army has just been pushed out of Quebec.
Yeah.
British reinforcements have shown up. The American attempt to invade Canada has totally fallen apart.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Total mess, yeah. So now Carleton, who's the British governor of Quebec, he's got this pretty substantial force. It's like 9,000 troops.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there at Fort Saint-Jean. And their plan is, we're going to use Lake Champlain
Oh.
as like a highway south into the upper Hudson River Valley.
Okay, I see. So a direct route. So why is the lake so important for this? Paint that picture for me a little bit more.
All right, so think about it. To move that many soldiers
Yeah.
and all their stuff, you need a good way to move them, right?
Yeah.
Controlling Lake Champlain lets them bypass all the rough terrain, the bad roads. It's way faster.
Yeah.
And if they can control that water, get down the Hudson, they could actually split the New England colonies from the rest of the colonies.
Oh, wow.
And New England was like the heart of the rebellion. So
Ah.
that's like, cutting the army in half.
Yeah.
Huge strategic move. It might have ended the revolution right there.
Wow. Okay, so that makes it super clear why this lake is so important. But what is Lake Champlain itself like? What are we talking about geographically?
Okay, so picture this. It's a long, narrow lake, about 120 miles long. It was actually carved out by glaciers, so it's pretty shallow. I mean, average depth is only about 64 feet.
Oh, wow.
And for this whole military thing, the key fact is it flows south to north.
Okay.
Eventually, it connects to the St. Lawrence River through the Richelieu River.
Right.
But there are falls at Saint-Jean.
Oh.
That's the furthest north that the big ships can really go.
I see. So it's this long kind of north-south highway.
Exactly.
And the Americans have these forts, Fort Crown Point, Fort Ticonderoga at the south end. So that's what the British have to get through.
Exactly.
So those are like the big roadblocks.
Total roadblocks.
Yeah.
So to get to the Hudson, they got to take those out. But going overland is a nightmare. We're talking like 90 miles north from the St. Lawrence Valley. Terrible roads, not much there. Using the lake is just way easier, way faster.
It makes a lot of sense. So what about the ships? Who's got what at this point?
Okay, so the Americans, they actually started with a few ships. Benedict Arnold had put together a little fleet after they captured Fort Ticonderoga back in May 1775.
Right.
But then, when they retreated from Quebec, Arnold, smart guy, he made sure they took or destroyed anything the British could use. When they left Fort Saint-Jean, they burned or sank everything, even things like the sawmill, even parts of the fort itself.
Wow, denying the enemy those resources.
Exactly. So both sides basically had to start from scratch. It was a naval arms race.
Okay, wow. An arms race on a lake. So where did they build these fleets? Where were the shipyards?
Well, the British, they set up shop at Saint-Jean, which makes sense. It's at the north end of the lake system. And the Americans, they went to Skenesboro.
Okay.
Today we call that Whitehall, New York. That's at the south end.
All right. And wasn't there something about the British having an advantage? Something about prefabricated ships or something?
You got it. Carleton, way back in 1775, when he was planning to defend Quebec, He realized they might need some serious firepower on Lake Champlain.
Smart.
So he asked for prefabricated ships from Europe.
Oh, wow.
And by the time his army got to Saint-Jean, they had 10 of these ships, in pieces, of course.
Oh, right. They had to put them together.
Yeah, skilled shipwrights had to assemble them. And on top of that, they also built this really impressive warship, the Inflexible.
The Inflexible.
It's a great name, right?
Yeah. I mean, just the name sounds scary.
Yeah. And building that was a huge job. They actually took it apart in Quebec City, moved all the pieces upriver, and then rebuilt it.
Wow. Okay, so both sides have these new ships. How do they actually compare in terms of firepower?
Well, the British, they definitely had the upper hand.
Yeah.
Their fleet ended up with 25 armed vessels,
Mm-hmm.
and they had way more firepower than the Americans' 15 ships.
Whoa, a big difference.
Yeah, over 80 guns for
Yeah.
the British compared to 74 for the Americans.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the British guns were bigger. They could do more damage. You just think about it. 2 of Carleton's ships, the Inflexible with 18 12-pound cannons,
Wow.
and the Thunderer, which was like a floating fortress. It had 6 24-pound guns, 6 12-pound guns, and even 2 howitzers. Just those 2 ships had more firepower than the whole American fleet put together.
That's insane. It's like David and Goliath, but like 100 Goliaths.
Yeah, it really was. The British also had these schooners, the Maria with 14 guns, the Carleton with 12, and the Loyal Convert with 6. And then they had 20 gunboats, each with 2 cannons.
So the Americans are facing a really tough challenge here. How do they even begin to compete with that?
Well, it's rough. I mean, for one thing, they need skilled shipwrights. And upstate New York, those are hard to find.
Huh.
So Continental Navy, they got to pay a lot of money to get these guys to come from the coast.
Right, right. So they're spending a lot of money just to get the workers.
Yeah. In fact, the shipwrights were the highest paid guys in the whole Navy, second only to the Commodore. By July, they had over 200 of these guys in Skenesboro.
Wow, so Skenesboro must have been a busy place. But it's not just about the workers, right? What about all the materials they needed?
Yeah, that's a huge problem too. All the stuff they need, timber, canvas, rigging, cannons, gunpowder,
Yeah.
it all has to be hauled up to Scansboro to build new ships or to Fort Ticonderoga to outfit the ones they already have.
It's a massive logistical challenge.
It really is.
Hmm.
And the guy running things at Skenesboro, that's Hermanus Schuyler, probably related to General Philip Schuyler. And then there's Juduthan Baldwin, the military engineer. He's in charge of fitting out the ships. Early on, Schuyler's focus was to build some bigger, tougher ships, different from the little bateau they'd been using mostly.
Right, so where does Benedict Arnold fit into all of this? He's the guy who ends up leading the fleet into battle.
So at first, other folks were in charge of the shipbuilding.
Okay.
But General Horatio Gates, he's the one in charge of the whole Northern Theater, he realizes Arnold has experience. I mean, Arnold used to be a ship's captain in the Merchant Marine.
Oh, right, he knows about ships.
Yeah, so Gates basically says, hey, Benedict, you take over. Even Gates admits he knows nothing about marine affairs. And Arnold, he jumps right in. And Gates is happy to have him. He even calls Arnold, he says he has perfect knowledge in maritime affairs.
Yeah.
And he calls him a most gallant and deserving officer and gives him command of the fleet.
So he's basically the perfect man for the job.
At least that's what Gates thinks.
Yeah.
But, you know, Arnold's a land soldier.
Yeah.
This whole naval thing, it can't have been easy.
Yeah.
I bet there were some bumps along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Definitely not. In fact, there was this big fight early on. Jacobus Wincoop, he'd been in charge of the boats on the lake before, and he wouldn't listen to Gates.
Oh, wow.
Insubordination. They ended up arresting him.
Wow.
And on top of that, a bad fever broke out in the shipyards in August. Probably something like typhus.
Oh, no.
Slowed everything down. They tried to isolate folks with smallpox, but it was still a mess.
A tough situation all around. So they're building this fleet, but what are they doing with it in the lead up to the battle?
Well, while everyone's building ships, the Americans start patrolling the lake.
Okay.
In August, Arnold even takes some of his ships right up to the north end of the lake, almost to Saint-Jean. He even gets them in a battle line.
Wow.
But the British outpost there, it's too far inland to attack.
I see.
Then on September 30th, Arnold figures the British fleet is almost ready. So he pulls back to these sheltered waters around Valcour Island.
Valcour Island.
Yeah,
That's where the battle happens. So he's deliberately choosing this spot.
he is. Arnold, you know, he'd been a merchant captain before the war. He sailed to Europe, the West Indies, all over.
Right, so he knows his stuff.
He does. He picked this narrow, rocky passage between the mainland and Valcour Island. It's near Plattsburgh, New York, if you want to picture it.
Okay.
And he knows his fleet is outgunned. He even got intel on October 1st saying the British force was way bigger and better armed than he thought.
Wow.
But this tight space, that's key to his plan.
Okay. So he's trying to even the odds by choosing the location?
Exactly. It limits the British advantage in open water.
Yeah.
Plus, his own guys aren't that experienced. This way, they don't have to worry about fancy maneuvers.
That makes sense. But weren't some of his own captains, like, disagreeing with this plan?
That's right. Some of them wanted to fight in the open lake. They figured they'd have a better chance to run away if things went south.
Makes sense, in a way.
Yeah. But Arnold, he's not really trying to win a big victory. He knows his fleet is weaker.
Right.
His goal is to delay the British, keep them from attacking Fort Crown Point and Fort Ticonderoga until spring. Buy time for the Continental Army to get ready.
It's a delaying tactic. Okay, so remind me what ships Arnold actually has under his command at Valcour Island. What's the fleet look like?
Okay, so he's got a bit of a mixed bag here.
Okay.
He's got 2 schooners, the Royal Savage with 12 guns, captained by David Hawley, and the Revenge with 8. He's also got the sloop Enterprise with 12 guns. And then he's got row galleys, the Congress, which is his flagship in the battle, that one's got 8 guns. The Trumbull and the Washington each with 10. Then he has the Cutter Lee with 6 guns and 8 gundelows.
8 gundelows. Now, what exactly is a gundelow for those of us who don't know our Revolutionary warship types?
Yeah, good point. So a gundelow is basically a flat-bottomed gunboat designed for shallow water. They each had 3 guns. The names are great. New Haven, Providence, Boston, Spitfire, Philadelphia, Connecticut, Jersey, and New York.
Oh, I love those names.
They're great.
It's like they name them after all the colonies or something.
Yeah, pretty much. The one ship that's missing is the schooner Liberty. That one got sent back to Ticonderoga to get supplies. Oh, and one more thing. During those earlier patrols, Arnold used the Royal Savage as his flagship.
Okay.
But for this battle, he switches his flag to the Congress.
Interesting. Okay, so the stage is set. Arnold is in position. The British are on their way. What happens when these two forces finally clash?
So Carleton's fleet, under Captain Thomas Pringle, they enter Lake Champlain on October 9th. And get this, they've also got 50 unarmed support vessels with them.
Wow, so it's a huge flotilla.
Huge. They move south, cautiously, looking for the American ships. On the night of October 10th, they anchor about 15 miles north of Arnold, but they still don't know exactly where he is.
They're in the dark.
Literally.
Yeah.
Then, on October 11th, with good wind behind them, they keep moving south. And when they sail past the northern tip of Valcour Island,
Here we go.
that's when Arnold sends out the Congress and the Royal Savage. He wants to get their attention.
Make them see him.
Exactly. Draw them in.
So this is all part of his plan to lure them into the battle.
Exactly. They exchange a few shots, but it doesn't really do much damage. Then, the 2 American ships try to fall back to Arnold's line, which is arranged in this crescent shape in Valcour Bay.
Oh, cool. So he has like a battle formation set up.
Yeah, he's ready for them. But the Royal Savage, she has trouble with the headwind.
Oh.
She can't maneuver well and ends up running aground on the southern tip of Valcour Island.
Oh, man. That's a tough break right at the beginning. What happens to the ship?
Well, a bunch of British gunboats swarm in on her.
Oh, no.
Captain Hawley and his crew, they have to abandon ship.
They just have to leave her.
They have to. Then, sailors from the Loyal Convert board the Royal Savage, and they capture 20 American crew members. But then, they have to abandon the Royal Savage too, because the rest of the American fleet is firing on them.
Wow. It's chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
And in the end, the British just set the Royal Savage on fire. She's completely destroyed. And even worse, Arnold lost a lot of important papers in that fire. Personal stuff, military stuff, it's all gone.
A huge loss, both the ship and all that information. So the British see where the Americans are.
Yeah.
What happens next? How does the main battle unfold?
Okay, so the British gunboats, along with the schooner Carleton, they move into range.
Okay.
The bigger ships, the Thunderer and the Maria, they're struggling against the wind. They can't really get involved at first.
Okay.
But the Inflexible, remember that big, powerful ship?
Yeah.
It finally makes its way up the strait and joins the fight. And around 12:30 p.m., boom, the main battle begins. Both sides start blasting away, broadside after broadside, just nonstop cannon fire all afternoon long.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like it's a really intense fight. Are there any key moments, any specific things that happen that are worth noting?
Absolutely. So the Revenge, she gets hit hard early on. And the Gundelow Philadelphia, she gets pounded so badly she actually sinks around 6:30 p.m.
Oh, wow.
The Carleton's guns, they're really doing damage, especially to those smaller American gunboats.
Yeah.
So the Americans focus their fire on her.
Yeah, makes sense. Take out the biggest threat.
Yeah. And they get lucky. One shot cuts the line, holding the Carleton's guns in place. It causes a lot of damage before they can tow her out of the line.
Oh, wow. So the Americans are hitting back.
They are. The Carleton ends up with a lot of casualties. 8 killed, 8 wounded, including the captain, Lieutenant James Dacres.
Oh, wow. So a big blow for the British.
Yeah. And there's this amazing story about a young British officer on the Carleton, Midshipman Edward Pellew.
Oh, yeah. I think I read about him.
Yeah, he's incredible. When all the senior officers are out of commission, he takes command and gets that damaged ship to safety. He's a hero. And the Americans, they get their own lucky shot. They hit a British gunboats magazine, and kaboom.
A direct hit. So they're fighting back despite being outgunned. But how does the day's fighting end? Why does it stop?
Well, as night falls, the American fleet is in bad shape. Most of their ships are damaged or sinking. They've lost about 60 men.
Yeah.
The British have lost about 40, and some of their smaller gunboats are running out of ammo.
Yeah.
So they call off the attack as well.
Oh, I see.
One of the British lieutenants, James Haddon, he wrote in his journal that only about a third of the British fleet even saw real action that day.
Really? Interesting.
And on top of everything else, the British have started landing Native American allies on Valcour Island and the mainland.
Oh, so they're trying to block any escape route.
Exactly.
So October 11th, it's a clear tactical victory for the British.
You got it.
But the battle isn't over. Arnold does something pretty daring that night. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Arnold knows he can't win a stand-up fight against the British fleet. So he makes a risky decision. They're going to try to escape south to Fort Crown Point. It's about 35 miles away.
Wow.
It's dark, it's foggy, perfect cover.
Yeah.
They muffle their oars, use minimal lights, and they sneak right through a narrow channel between the British ships and the western shore.
That's crazy. They're going right past the enemy in the dark.
They are, and it works. By the morning of October 12th, they've made it to Schuyler Island.
Schuyler Island?
Yeah, it's about 8 miles south of Valcour Island. Carleton, they say he was furious when he realized the Americans had slipped away. He sends his fleet after them, but it's too late. We're gone. So he sends scouts out to try and find them.
So a daring escape. But the retreat isn't easy, is it?
No, it's not. Bad winds, damaged ships, they're leaking, they're slow. At Schuyler Island, they have to sink or burn the Providence and the Jersey, both gondolas. Too damaged to keep going.
Oh, man. So they're losing more ships?
They are. They also have to do some quick repairs to the others. And they have to abandon the cutter, Lee, on the western shore. The British end up capturing her later.
They're getting whittled down.
They are.
What happens when the British finally catch up?
So around 2 p.m. on October 13th, the American fleet sets sail again. But the wind, the rain, even some sleet, they're working against them. By the next morning, they're still over 20 miles from Crown Point. And then they see them. The masts of the British fleet on the horizon.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And then the wind shifts. Now, the British have the wind at their backs, and they close in fast. They start firing on the Congress, Arnold's flagship, and the Washington.
It's the final showdown.
It is. Arnold, he tries to beach the slower gunboats at Split Rock.
Yes, sir.
It's about 18 miles from Crown Point. He's hoping to keep them from being captured. But the Washington, she's too damaged, too slow. She can't make it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they have to surrender.
Yeah.
The British capture 110 American sailors.
Another ship lost. What about Arnold and the rest of the fleet? How does this all end?
Well, Arnold takes what's left of his ships into this shallow bay on the Vermont side. It's called Arnold's Bay now.
Named after him.
It is.
Wow.
The water there is too shallow for the big British ships. So they run their boats aground, take everything useful off them, and then they set them on fire.
Oh.
With their flags still flying. It's a last act of defiance. Arnold himself is the last to leave the Congress. He sets her on fire with his own hands.
Wow.
Then he and about 200 surviving crew members, they escape overland to Crown Point. The only American ships that survive are the schooners. Enterprise and Revenge, they outran the British, and the Liberty, which had just come back from Ticonderoga with supplies.
So in terms of ships, it's a huge loss for the Americans.
It is.
What happens next? What are the immediate consequences of this defeat?
Well, Arnold knows he can't hold Fort Crown Point against the British, so he orders them to destroy it and abandon it. Then they fall back to Fort Ticonderoga, which has better defenses. But then something unexpected happens. Carleton, instead of taking his prisoners all the way back to Quebec, he sends them back to Ticonderoga.
Oh, why would he do that?
Under a flag of truce. He's being generous. And the American soldiers, They're actually impressed by Carleton's good treatment. They start talking about it when they get back. And the American commanders, they're actually worried about desertions.
Oh, wow. So Carlton's kindness backfires in a way.
Yeah, it does. They even end up sending some of the prisoners home, just in case.
That's amazing. So the British have control of Lake Champlain. What do they do next?
Well, the next day, they land troops and take Fort Crown Point. Easy pickings now. They stay there for about 2 weeks, sending scouts up close to Fort Ticonderoga to check out the defenses.
But they don't attack. Why not?
Well, winter is coming. It's late October, and it's starting to snow. Carleton knows that keeping his supply lines open through the winter would be a nightmare.
Makes sense.
So he decides to pull back north to Canada for the winter. And in a way, this means Arnold succeeded.
Oh, how so?
Remember, his goal was to delay the British.
Right.
He did that. One of the Hessian commanders, Baron Riedesel, he said that if they had started their campaign just 4 weeks earlier, they probably could have won the whole thing that year.
Wow. So this battle on the lake, it really did have a big impact on the war.
It did. Big time.
Yeah.
It directly affected the British campaign in 1777, the one led by General John Burgoyne.
Right.
The Americans, including Arnold, they managed to stop Burgoyne at Saratoga.
Yeah.
And when Burgoyne surrenders, that's a turning point in the war. It's what convinced France to officially recognize America and join the war on their side.
So this small naval battle really had huge consequences.
Fascinating. So,
Right.
were there any repercussions within the British fleet about what happened at Valcour Island?
Oh, yeah. The captains of the Maria, the Inflexible and the Loyal Convert, they actually wrote a letter complaining about Captain Pringle.
Oh, wow.
They were not happy. They said he let Arnold escape by not blocking the channel properly, and they thought he wasn't aggressive enough during the battle. So they thought he could have done better.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem to have hurt anyone's career. Pringle became an admiral in the Royal Navy. Same with John Shank, the captain of the Inflexible.
Really?
Yeah, and so did young Pellew and Dacres.
So no hard feelings, I guess.
And Carleton, he got his reward too. King George III gave him the Order of the Bath.
Wow.
And there was a big party to celebrate the victory.
Of course. What about Benedict Arnold? What happened to him after all this? I mean, we all know how his story ends, but what about the impact of this battle?
Well, remember how he lost all those papers when the Royal Savage sank?
Yeah.
That actually came back to bite him years later. Congress started investigating his actions during the Quebec campaign.
Oh, right.
And without those papers, he couldn't prove he was telling the truth about certain things. He couldn't defend himself against accusations.
That's rough.
It was. And some historians think this really made him bitter, made him resent the American cause. You know, on top of that, he'd already started talking to the British in secret about switching sides.
Wow.
It's a complex story, but the loss of those papers at Valcour Island, it definitely played a role in his eventual betrayal.
So, a turning point, but in a sad way. That's fascinating. Now, this all happened a long time ago. Have they ever found any of the ships from the battle?
They have. It's amazing. In the 1930s, there was this guy, Lorenzo Haglund, World War I vet, loved history. He was obsessed with finding these shipwrecks.
Wow.
He found the Royal Savage in 1932, raised it in 1934.
Oh, wow.
It was stored for a long time, but right now it's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
But the city of Plattsburgh, New York, they want it back.
Of course they do.
Yeah. In 1935, Haglund also found and raised the Gundalow Philadelphia. And get this, it was in perfect condition, just sitting upright on the lake bottom.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a National Historic Landmark now, on display at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. So cool.
And then more recently, in 1997, the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, they found another wreck. Turned out to be the Gundalow Spitfire. They figured that out in 1999. That's a National Historic Landmark, too. And Valcour Bay itself, the whole bay, it became a National Historic Landmark in 1961.
So these pieces of history, they're still out there telling the story of this battle. That's incredible. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? Why should they care about the Battle of Valcour Island?
Well, even though the Americans lost a lot of ships,
Yeah.
in the big picture, it was a strategic win for them. Arnold, he made some smart choices.
Yeah.
Picking the battleground, putting up a tough fight, even though he was outnumbered.
Right.
He delayed the British, and that gave the Continental Army time to get stronger.
And that was crucial.
It was. It was a big reason they won at Saratoga in 1777.
Absolutely. So even in defeat, they achieved their strategic goals. Arnold was a clever guy. He outsmarted a much bigger enemy force, and that bought the Americans time, which is what they really needed. It makes you think about how these smaller events can have a ripple effect throughout history, right? What other big moments might have turned out differently because of this one battle? I mean, it's amazing to think about the impact of naval power, even on a lake during the Revolution. It really makes you want to learn more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.